Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki. When Lord Ramachandra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was the king of this world, all bodily and mental suffering, disease, old age, bereavement, lamentation, distress, fear, and fatigue were completely absent. There was even no death for those who did not want it. Purport. All these facilities existed because of Lord Ramachandra's presence as a king of the entire world. A similar situation could be introduced immediately, even in this age called Kali, the worst of all ages. It is said, Kali Kale Nama Rupe Krishna Avatar. Krishna descends in this Kali Yuga in the form of his holy name, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. If we chant offenselessly, Rama and Krishna are still present in this age. The kingdom of Ram was immensely popular and beneficial, and the spreading of this Hare Krishna movement can immediately introduce a similar situation, even in this Kali Yuga. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Mandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagna Raghunatham Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagna Lalita Shri Vishakham Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitam Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashadi Gaura Bhakta Brinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'd like to beg for the blessings of the assembled Vaishnavas. We can speak something bona fide and beneficial for all concerned. So, I wanted to begin by giving an overview of where we're at here in the Bhagavatam. So, we're obviously on the 9th canto, the 10th chapter. And I was wondering when I began looking at this verse, obviously when you're preparing for a class, then you look at things from a slightly different perspective, maybe a slightly deeper perspective. We've been on Ram Leela for some weeks now. So I was looking at the various cantos, and if you see canto 4, 5 and 6, well, let's take a step back. If you take Lord Brahma, he lives for 100 years, 100 of his years. And each of his years have 360 days. And each of his days is made up of 1,000 Mahayugas. So 1,000 Mahayugas. A Mahayuga is the 4 ages, beginning with the Satyayug, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga and Kali Yuga. That's one Mahayuga, and 1,000 of those makes up one day of Lord Brahma. Now if you take one day of Lord Brahma, these 1,000 Mahayugas, made up of 14 Manvantaras. So 14 Manus make up 1,000 Mahayugas. And so there's 14 Manus, and it begins with Swayambhuva Manu. So the pastimes and the progeny of Swayambhuva Manu is described mainly in cantos 4, 5 and 6. So there's various different conversations which take place within the Bhagavatam, and sometimes it's a conversation within a conversation within a conversation, so it can be a little difficult to get your head around it all. It begins with Sutta Goswami speaking to the sages of Naimisharanya, and then he describes the conversation between Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadev Goswami. And then Shukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj describe many, many conversations which have taken place in the past. Cantos 3 and 4 are dictated by, or mainly to do with Vidura and Maitreya. Some conversation between Narad Muni and Yudhishthira Maharaj is described in Canto 7. So many, many conversations within conversations. But the progeny of Swayambhuva Manu, so the function of the Manus, of the Manvantaras, is to have progeny, is to create children, because at the beginning it was just Lord Brahma. And his program was to create population, to populate the world. So it wasn't just with humans, he populated the world with many, many living entities, animals of all different varieties. Cantos 2 and 3 describe creation 3 times from various perspectives. But in Cantos 4, 5 and 6, we focus on the progeny of Swayambhuva Manu. Then Canto 8, Parikshit Maharaj looks to know more about the various Manus. So Sukadev Goswami describes the various Manus, Manus 2 to 6, then the current Manu, the 7th Manu. So we're currently in the, presiding over us is Vaivasvata Manu, who's the 7th Manu. And then he describes Manus 8 to 14 as well. This is in the 8th canto. So then at the beginning of the 9th canto, I hope this is making sense. But at the beginning of the 9th canto, Parikshit Maharaj wants to know more about our current Manu. He wants to know more about the progeny of Vaivasvata Manu, the 7th Manu. And so Shukadev Goswami begins to describe the various progeny of Vaivasvata Manu. So there's 2 main categories, or 2 main descendants of Vaivasvata Manu. The first is those descending from the sun god. And the second is those descending from the moon god. So Chandra and Surya, or Surya and Chandra. So chapters 1 to 13 of this 9th canto focus on the descendants of the sun god. And chapters 14 to 24 focus on the descendants of the moon god. So Vaivasvata Manu, he had children. One of them was Ikshvaku. We hear about him in the Bhagavad Gita, beginning of the 4th chapter. And then he had many, many children, many, many descendants. Later there was Maharaj Dashrath. And he had a son who was none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ram. And so chapters 10 and 11 of this 9th canto are dedicated towards describing the pastimes of Lord Ram. So Shukadev Goswami, of course, says the Ramayana, which describes in much greater detail the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra. That's 24,000 verses. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is 18,000 verses. The Ramayana is 24,000 verses, which describe the qualities, the pastimes, the associates, the abode of Lord Ramachandra. Very wonderful pastimes. And we'll be discussing some of those. But in this particular verse, what's being discussed is one aspect of the purport. Prabhupada is really talking about Ramarajya. So this concept, and the verses are talking about the wonderful prosperity, peace, and the wonderful situation that was created due to the presence of Lord Ramachandra. So it's described in the Bhagavatam at the end of the 1st canto. It says, Bhavadvidha Bhagavatas Tirthabhuta Swayam Vivo Tirthi Kurvanti Tirthani Swantastena Gadhabrita. Wherever there is the devotees of the Lord, because the Lord is residing within the devotees' hearts, in that place everything is peaceful, everything is prosperous, and everything is very spiritual. So this is Yudhishthira Maharaj. He describes Vidura in this way. So because the Lord is present, everything has to be very peaceful and very prosperous. When Lord Krishna leaves, that is when Kali Yuga begins to come. Kali Yuga cannot come in the presence of Lord Krishna. So the Lord creates a very wonderful situation, a very peaceful situation. So there's many politicians, many political leaders in India, especially who call for Rama Rajya, who've been calling for Rama Rajya in India for many, many years. So they're very selective of what they mean by Rama Rajya. They want peace, they want prosperity. They want lots of natural resources. They want all the facilities, but they don't want to put anything in. They don't understand what Ram Rajya actually means. The reason the kingdom of Ram was very peaceful was because they were following the laws of nature. Number one, they were surrendering and they were serving and respecting the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ram. And number two, they were respecting this sacred pact between nature and man. So the Ishopanishad, it describes a very core principle of how we should deal with nature. So does anyone know, there's some devotees doing Bhakti Shastri at the moment, you must know the first verse of the Ishopanishad. Anyone? Been learning? The first mantra, yes, the first mantra of the Ishopanishad. Wonderful, wonderful. Very nice. So the Bhakti Shastri should know that, and I'm sure if they don't, then they will do very soon. But the principle of this verse, of the first verse, Ishavashamidam Sarvam, we understand that everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the controller. And we use anything according to our quota. That means we live a simple life and we take whatever we need. So it's described that man has enough for his need, but not for his greed. We live such a greedy lifestyle, especially in the West, especially in this day and age. But in the past, the reason things were very prosperous and very peaceful was because people lived very simple lives. They lived very God-conscious lives, and they worked according to the principles of Mother Nature. They didn't take advantage. So there's a political economist called Thomas Malthus. You may have heard of him. In the late 19th century, early 20th century, Thomas Malthus, and he came up with this theory. He said that populations would never be able to increase above a certain limit because the world only has a certain amount of resources in order to allow a certain amount of population to live. So there's only so many grains, only so many resources which can allow a population to exist. And the world only has a limited amount of resources. And therefore, if the population goes above a certain amount, they will suffer from famine, etc., and therefore they'll die. And the population will not be able to go above a certain amount. But our understanding is a little different. Our understanding is that Earth, Mother Earth, can provide unlimited resources to allow an unlimited population to exist, as long as we live according to the laws of nature. So this is something that is not understood by the average person these days, and this is why people call for Ram Rajya. They call for a situation where Hinduism is very much prominent, but they don't really understand the true extent of Hinduism and how it permeates, or the Sanatana Dharma. They don't understand how it permeates every aspect of our lives. Everything that we do, everything that we think is affected, is governed by the principles of the Vedic philosophy. So the BJP is obviously in control in India at the moment, and recently they, in some places, they introduced Sanskrit as being compulsory in some schools, and this created a big stir. So India is probably not going to get much more right wing than it is at the moment with the BJP. Of course, there's many others. There are many more very far right-wing groups in India, like the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the very right wing, they want Hinduism, they want Sanatana Dharma to be controlling India throughout. So that will probably never happen. But this idea of having peace in this world, Krishna is very clear with the peace formula in the Bhagavad Gita. How can we really have peace in this world? And ultimately it comes down to understanding that Krishna is the controller and the enjoyer. Bhoktaryam yagitapasam sarva loka maheshwaram. We have to understand that Krishna is our true well-wisher, and he is the real beneficiary of anything that we have, of all sacrifices, of ultimately anything that we own, anything that we may think we control, actually should be for the pleasure of the Lord. So there are other examples in the Bhagavatam which describe a very peaceful situation. In the 4th canto, Maharaj Prithu, he was the son of King Vena. So if we remember from the 4th canto, Vena was a very tyrannical ruler. He was very demonic in his attitude. And in his presence, people were very much subjugated. And so the Brahmanas got together and they killed King Vena. And in that situation, there was no king. There was no ruler. So sometimes they say a blind uncle is better than, or a blind monkey is better than, no, a blind uncle is better than no uncle at all. And this is a case in this situation, this was a case. Because without King Vena, there was no ruler. And it meant, the Bhagavatam describes that the thieves and rogues, they proliferated. So when thieves and rogues proliferate, like in our society today, Mother Earth gets exploited and she stops cooperating. So when Prithu Maharaj came in control, Mother Earth had stopped cooperating, and therefore people in the kingdom of Maharaj Prithu were suffering. So they approached Maharaj Prithu and they said, "O king, you're such a great ruler, you're such a saintly personality, why is it that we don't have food to eat?" So the duty of a king, the duty of a ruler, is to take care of his subjects, to take care of all of the praja, every single living entity. So that involves not just humans, but animals, trees, plants. Every living entity has to be taken care of under the rule of a true ruler. So Maharaj Prithu was very upset, and he went to find out what was the problem. So he took his bow and arrow and he was about to shoot Mother Earth and kill her. He said, "You are taking your part in every sacrifice. We perform various sacrifices and you're taking your part. But why are you not providing sufficient grains for the public?" So Mother Earth became very scared and she turned into a form of a cow and she ran away. But Prithu Maharaj was very fast as well, and he chased after her. And he was about to kill her, but then she apologized. And then she promised that she would provide all the food grains that were required for everyone in Maharaj Prithu's kingdom, which was a world, to survive. So, and after that, Maharaj Prithu, under his kingdom, under his reign, everything was very peaceful and very prosperous. But again, it was because he was working under the rule of Mother Nature, or he was working according to the rules and regulations. So how can we, Prabhupada says in this purport, it's very interesting, he said that even today, a wonderful situation, a very peaceful, very prosperous situation can be established. And essentially, it is through yajna. It has to be through yajna. So in the Satya Yuga, the yajna was the meditation. So people would meditate for up to 10,000 years. In the Treta Yuga, the key process for the age was fire sacrifices. Huge amounts of resources will be used for sacrifices. Nothing that we can imagine today. Huge amounts of gold, rubies, diamonds, emeralds, ghee, so many items will be used. The Havan Kund, we have a Havan Kund about this big. But in those days it used to be miles long. Miles long, imagine that. Huge fires. Then in the Dwapar Yuga, the key yajna for the age was deity worship. But in today's age, in this Kali Yuga, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has introduced the yajna for the age, and that is the Sankirtan yajna. So Sankirtan means the chanting and the glorification of the Lord. And this is something which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has introduced and Prabhupada has proliferated across the entire planet. And he's given this as the key process for the age, the way to satisfy everyone. All of the demigods are naturally satisfied. Mother Earth is naturally satisfied, and in this way he will provide us with everything that we need. So we have to engage in this process. But we have to do it in a pure way. And that means that we have to have Krishna in the heart somehow. So of course this is the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra. So I was reading about Hanuman. Such wonderful pastimes of Lord Hanuman. At the end of the 14-year exile, it was time to go back to Ayodhya. So Lord Ram, Sita, Lakshman and Hanuman were ready to go back. But Lord Ram remembered that Bharat had taken a vow. He didn't want Lord Ram to leave for the 14-year exile. The only way that Lord Ram was allowed, or that Bharat agreed to not commit suicide or not to end his own life, was the agreement that after 14 years exactly, Lord Ram would return and take over the kingdom. And in the meantime, Bharat kept Lord Ram's paduka, his shoes, on the throne. And Bharat left the kingdom himself and he lived on the outskirts as a mendicant. So Lord Ram remembered that if I do not go back within this 14-year time frame, if I'm a second after, Bharat will enter into fire and end his own life. So he sent Hanuman very quickly back to Ayodhya in order to make sure that Bharat didn't do anything that he didn't want him to do. So when Hanuman returned, he saw Bharat Maharaj, he was circumambulating a fire. He'd circumambulated once and then twice. And after 7 times, he was going to enter into the fire. So Hanuman came and saved the day. He said, please stop, please stop. Lord Ram is coming, Lord Ram is coming. And everyone was baffled. Who is this person? You know, he's a monkey and he's speaking and he's saying Lord Ram is coming. No, of course, no one had met Hanuman because Lord Ram had met Hanuman during the exile in the forest. So Bharat thought, am I hallucinating? I haven't eaten for such a long time. Maybe it's just my mind. So then he saw and they began to speak. And no one believed that Hanuman was actually a messenger from Lord Ram. And no one believed that he was actually a wonderful devotee of Lord Ram. So then they were speaking, and then eventually Lord Ram returned. Bharat was saved. And when they returned, Lord Ram and Sita were giving presents to everyone. They were giving presents because they had just returned. And Sita also gave Hanuman a present, some wonderful, very precious pearls and jewels. And Hanuman took them and being a monkey started eating them. And so then the people started asking, you went to the forest and you've come back from the forest, but why have you brought the forest with you? So Hanuman was very different to everyone. So then Ram said, listen Hanuman, no one really believes who you are. No one really understands your heart. So please exhibit to them. Please exhibit to them how much you love me, how surrendered you are. So Hanuman thought for a moment, and he thought the best way, Shri Shri Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. So Hanuman thought for a while and he thought, how can I glorify or how can I show these people that Lord Ram is very dear to me? So anyone who's been to India will see Hanuman, he just tore open his chest. And in his chest was Sita and Ram and Lakshman and Hanuman in his heart. And within that heart of Hanuman, inside his heart, was another Hanuman who had opened his chest. And inside that heart was Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman. And inside that heart of the Hanuman was another Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman, infinitely deep. infinitely deep. So Hanuman deeply, deeply had the Lord in his heart. So he was so keen to serve the Lord. When they returned to Ayodhya, Hanuman was so habituated to serving Lord Ram. He was always looking for some service. He said, for such a long time in the forest, I was the prime servant of Lord Ram. But because Lord Ram had been away for 14 years, there were so many people who were so eager to serve Lord Ram. So people were queuing up. And so Hanuman was complaining to Mother Sita. He was saying, what am I doing here? What are we doing here? Let's just go back to the forest. There I can serve Lord Ram full time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is the best situation for me. So Sita said, don't worry, I'll find you some service. There must be some service to do. So then she went to the person in charge of Lord Ram's services, like the VIP guest master or something like we have here. And she went to Lord Ram and she said, she went to this person, she said, is there some service that Hanuman can do? And he said, no, there's no service. We're inundated with people to serve Lord Ram. So then Sita went to Ram and she said, is there some service that Hanuman can do for you? So then Hanuman was given the service of waking Lord Ram up in the mornings. So then he was very happy. Then he was very pleased. But his eagerness to serve is very powerful, very exemplary. So we can pray to Lord Ram. If we don't have eagerness to serve, we can pray to Lord Hanuman even. To gain eagerness to serve. And if we're already eager to serve, then we can pray to Hanuman for more eagerness to serve. But there's also wonderful examples of his surrender. Once Hanuman was very hungry. So he went to Mother Sita and he said, I'm very hungry, Mother, please give me some food to eat. So just like a child goes to his mother, Hanuman went to Mother Sita and said, please give me some food. And she was putting sindur, vermilion, on her head. So she was a little busy and she said, just wait a while, I'm just doing something, I won't be a moment. And she said, please Mother, I'm so hungry, please, I want some food. So then she said, no one can be that hungry, just wait for a while. And he said, I'm so hungry, just give me some fruits or something, otherwise I'll die. So then she said, I won't, just wait, Hanuman, just be patient. So then he went away. He got, but then he asked her, what is it that you're doing? What is it that's so important? And she said, I'm putting sindur on my head. And she said, he asked, what is the significance of this sindur? So then she said, that I'm the wife of Lord Ram, Lord Ramachandra. And by putting this vermilion on my head, it signifies that my husband will live a long life and he will be very prosperous. So Hanuman said, really? This is a significance. This is amazing. So then he just disappeared. And so Mother Sita finished what she was doing and then she very quickly began to get some fruits together and a nice feast for Hanuman. And then she came and she couldn't find him. Where is he gone? So then she looked around everywhere. She called the guard. She said, where is Hanuman? Where is Hanuman? And no one could find Hanuman. And then a little while longer, Hanuman suddenly appeared. He appeared back to Mother Sita. But she couldn't recognize him. She couldn't see a dhoti. She couldn't see his tail. She couldn't see anything. It was just a red blob. And she said, who are you? And Hanuman said, it's me, it's Hanuman. And she said, what have you done? And she said, Hanuman explained that you were putting a bit of sindur on your head. So I thought that I'd cover my whole body with sindur, because in this way, my wonderful Lord Ram would live a much longer life and have even more prosperity. So this was Hanuman's meditation. His focus was to simply serve and simply surrender. Service and surrender. So in our lives, it's a very wonderful example. Because two key characteristics of a devotee is his service and his surrender. What is the quality of his devotional service? What is the quality of his surrender? So there's 26 qualities of a Vaishnava. And it's explained that there's one primary quality and 25 secondary qualities. If that one primary quality is there, then all of the other qualities naturally manifest within an individual. And that one quality is surrender. So somehow we have to develop this in our own devotional lives. And if we can do this, then it's a very powerful thing, because then everything else works. And in this way, if we can develop a very good quality devotional life in ourselves, then it makes the Sankirtan Yajna much more natural and much more potent, much more powerful. The quality of consciousness is the key. So I was in York during the marathon. It was the last Sunday of the marathon, and the last few days of the marathon are always meant to be the best days of the marathon. And it was my first time in York. York for many years has been a no-go zone for the Mana devotees. So it was my first time actually going there. And we were with Nikhil, Zimon and Jankinath Prus. And we went there, and the first hour was hard work. And naturally the mind began to think, what am I doing here? Liverpool for the previous few days had been very good. And we had travelled 2 hours from Manchester to York. And I began to scratch my head wondering why we ever went to York. And then suddenly I stopped someone. And he was a normal-looking Yorkshireman. He was in his early 30s, stubble, short hair, wearing a cap, quite a cool-looking man. And I never really thought that he'd be very interested. And I handed him a Veda, and he began to look at it. And he was looking at it very carefully. And he looked at the back and he began to read it, and he seemed very interested. So I began to present the book in the normal way, karma, yoga, meditation, give us a donation, you know. And then he said, what else have you got? And then I showed him the Bhagavad Gita. And he looked at it and he was just stunned. And he said, this is the Bhagavad Gita? I said, yeah, this is the Bhagavad Gita. That's what it says in the book. And then he said, the Bhagavad Gita is the best book that I've ever read. I've read many, many books, but it's the best book I've ever read. And I just thought, first of all, that it was amazing to meet someone on the street who's read the Bhagavad Gita, but then on top of that, who appreciates the wisdom in the Bhagavad Gita so much. And an absolutely ordinary looking individual. You know, someone who you wouldn't really imagine was interested. And then he began to glorify the Bhagavad Gita. He started telling me the whole story of the Bhagavad Gita, the battle of Kurukshetra, Arjun, Krishna, how Arjun was bemused and confused, didn't know what to do, and then Krishna told him to fight. And he began reeling off the whole story with such enthusiasm, more enthusiasm than most devotees. And then he began describing his own spiritual journey, and it was a hodgepodge of various different paths, various different processes. And he said he had written his own book on spirituality, and he was going to go to Egypt and Israel in early January to promote his book. And he gave me his whole life story in 10 minutes. And I was clock watching, thinking, okay, when is he going to finish? And I can give him the book, he can give a donation, and then we can move on with life. So then he was about to, we got to the end, and I said, okay, so take the books. And for about the third time I said, you take the books, just give a donation. So how much shall I give? And for a book distributor, that's like music to your ears. And then I said, we just ask people to be generous. And he said, so what does generous mean? What do you want me to give? But I could see that he was very into it. So I said, just do your best. And then I gave him the idea of giving these books as sets for Christmas. They're great Christmas presents. There's no better gift than the gift of knowledge. So he said, you know what? That's a great idea. I've got so many friends who'd really appreciate this wisdom. So then I said, okay, so how many sets do you want? And he said, well, maybe I'll start with 5 sets. So I said, okay, that's 10 books. Not bad. So then I pile him up with the books, and he's had the books up there, and he had a cup of coffee in one hand and his books in another hand. So how much shall I give you? So then I said, just be generous. Last I gave £10 a book, why don't you just give 100? And then he pulled out his cash, and he had his cash was all scrumpled up, and he gave 120, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then he had another 30 in his hand, and he said, well, I might as well give you everything in my hand. So he just gave the other 32. So then I gave him another 3 books. I said, well, you give me 130, I'll give you 13 books. So there he was with a cup of coffee and 13 books piled up in one hand, and he's about to walk off, and I said, do you want to throw in another 20? They never give too much. Someone can never donate too much to Krishna. So then he said, yeah. And then he said, well, listen, if you want to collect funds. If you need funds, then maybe you can come along to my shop. I've got a shop just around the corner, and you can keep the books there. And you can sell the books, and I can give you whatever money is collected. So then the next day I went to his shop, and ended up, his shop is 3 floors. There's a cafe, and then a beauty salon, and then a tattoo studio upstairs. Now, I don't know if anyone's been to a tattoo studio before. I definitely haven't. A very mode of ignorance place. The music, the environment, people getting tattoos done in the most interesting places. And it was just a very terrible environment. But I was talking to him, and he took 60 books, and we agreed a price of £6 per book. So he gave another £360, and he took 40 Vedas, 20 Gitas, and a pack of Chant and Be Happy. And I was just amazed, because I met this guy on the street, normal person, and he was so inspired to distribute Prabhupada's books himself. He said, I really believe in this stuff, and therefore why would I not give it to other people? He said, I'm sure I can get rid of these, and I'll be in touch when I want some more. So book distribution is unlimited, and it's very powerful because you see miracles happen at every moment. We just have to see Krishna's hand in these miracles. But ultimately it's about consciousness, and it's almost 8:30, so I wanted to end with someone else's experience. He's a very good storyteller, much better than I am. And Zimon and Nick have heard this story many times. But I just wanted to share it with you because it's very powerful and really inspired me to really focus on the consciousness with which we do any service, whether it's preaching or otherwise. So this is many years ago. This devotee was distributing books at O'Hare Airport, or O'Hare Krishna Airport, as Prabhupada wanted it to be. So this is him speaking. One afternoon, we devotees were so intoxicated. So book distribution is intoxicating when you really get into it. We were so intoxicated by distributing books that we decided to show that one doesn't have to speak to sell books. That book distribution just depends on our state of consciousness. So we didn't. Just after loading my book bag with 20 Mahabooks, I tapped a man on the arm and looked him in the eye. He stopped, expecting me to say something. I didn't. I put a book in his hand, pointed at Prabhupada's picture, to the Sanskrit inside, and then pointed up to the sky, indicating the books are meant to elevate you. I remember being absorbed in the desire to give out books, and after looking deep into his eyes, again I slapped my pocket, indicating he should give a donation. He did. He was a young businessman, obviously heavily stressed out and floundering in the world of consumerism. He held the book appreciatively. As he started to go, I held his arm. I wanted him to get more mercy. This is a consciousness. I wanted him to get more mercy. We locked eyes for a minute, and in my mind I said, these books will give your life meaning. And I stuck another 2 Mahabooks in his hand. Now he had 3 books. Again I tapped my pocket. Again he gave a donation. I opened one of the books and pointed to a part of Prabhupada's purport and had him read it. I watched his face. It was obvious Prabhupada was speaking to him. I tapped his arms and smiled at him, and he smiled at me. Although standing in the middle of the busiest airport in the world, we were somewhere else, in a different land where there was no stress, no noise, our own world of Krishna consciousness. It doesn't end there. Then he looked at the other books in my arm, and I knew he wanted more. I gave him a few more books. He gave another donation. By now the total was past $40. This was in 1970 something. $40 is a lot. To impress upon the man what was reality, I waved nonchalantly at the bustle about us and pressed my forefinger to his heart. indicating the soul. I looked at him. You are not this body. You are spirit soul. He understood. He smiled appreciatively. We then shook hands, and as he turned to go, it was as if he was leaving a realm of peace for the world of anxiety around. For a minute, he hesitated. He didn't want to go. He wanted to remain in that realm of consciousness in which our exchange had taken place. He had been happy. I saw there were tears in his eyes. I touched his hand and tapped the book, saying in my mind, "It's all in the books. Don't worry." We had not spoken a word, yet we were communicating fully. It was one of many such experiences that afternoon. I was convinced that success in book distribution depends upon our state of consciousness. I was convinced that success in book distribution and in spiritual life depends on our state of consciousness. Making soul-to-soul contact with people is the most effective way to distribute books. We need to be in the consciousness that we are not this body, that we are Krishna's spiritual messengers, and that we have the want to distribute the mercy. Give, give, give. That is our dharma. Give Krishna to others. Srila Prabhupada ki, Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.